It's the Regular Expressions podcast. Join Noah Heldman and Ben Griswold as they talk about technology, consulting, and life. In episode 6, Ben and Noah talk about what to look for when hiring a technology consultant.
Hey Noah, how's it going?
Hey Ben, it's going well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We were just chatting about how between the two of us, we spent decades on both sides of the consulting table, both hiring consultants and being interviewed as consultants.
Yes, we actually hinted in our last podcast about what this one was going to be all about. And it's something that a lot of leaders struggle with. How do you bring in the right technology consultant?
Yeah, it's a great question because the stakes are high. Once I worked with a company that spent close to $2 million on a vendor who never delivered a working product. So that isn't just wasted money. It set them back a full year.
I think I remember that engagement, but there's also the flip side, which is one really great consultant can save a project in a couple weeks just by bringing the right type of clarity and the right structure. I guess what we've seen is in our careers, technology projects have gotten naturally larger and larger and more complex. And sure, we still serve a lot of the small customers, the startups, which is always fun and interesting. But when you're on a 6-7 figure project, the people who are bringing you in have to be super confident that they've got the right person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it gets tricky because consultants, they often sound really great when they're giving you their pitch. Right? There's the buzzwords. There's everything that makes you feel like, wow, they know their stuff. But what matters most is how they actually work with your people and deliver outcomes.
Yeah, I've seen stakeholders go into interviews convinced they already knew the solution. This happens all the time. The best consultants don't just nod along. They're asking questions to understand the situation, understand the pain points, the goals, and the outcomes that would actually make a difference for that company.
Exactly. A good consultant, they're curious. They're always getting to the why behind the problem or the opportunity that the business wants to seize.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
why don't we talk about, as a stakeholder, what you want to ask when you are in the interview with the consultant? A good interview, it's going to go deeper than tell me about yourself.
Yeah, and we learned this along the way. I think between us, we've probably done more than 1,000 interviews in our career. I looked at mine. It's kind of insane how many we've done. And I think a good half of those were not great because you learn along the way. You figure out what works. So exactly like you said, it's not just to tell me about yourself and you're not really listening to it. You have to understand, have they done this before? Have they worked on a project where they had to solve a challenge that was similar complexity, similar scale, maybe similar industry, similar technology stack, and be specific about it. Because if they're vague and it's just kind of, I did this and it was great, everyone loved it. If they're vague, it's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, I totally agree. You might remember this. We interviewed a consultant and tell us a bit about yourself, right? They spent 10 minutes with an answer that was full of technical baloney. It was all buzzwords. And they never actually got around to describing what they've done. And I think that really told us everything about this consultant, right? It really got to the heart of it. Well, that vagueness got to the heart of, well, maybe they don't have the experience that we need moving forward.
Yeah, that could be a show on its own, that that particular interview. But
Right.
Absolutely right. We've seen it all the time. So make sure that they're sharing something that they've actually done that's relevant to what you're trying to do. And then you want to move on to what approach would they take? How would they actually get it started? Is there a discovery process? Is there an assessment that you need to do? Can you actually deliver something quickly that provides value? and something that you can build on, something foundational that's going to get you to the next stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the flip side of that, there is, how do you start the engagement, but how are you going to close it out? I always like to ask about knowledge transfer. If you leave tomorrow, if you win the lottery and you're gone, what will my team be stronger, or are they completely dependent on you? So the vendor lock-in, that's potentially real. We want to learn about knowledge transfer. Mm-hmm.
I think we've both worked with a number of individuals who did an incredible job as firefighter and hero, mm-hmm. and sure. probably got their job security and accolades because of it. But you don't want a firefighter. You want to prevent the fire in the first place. Like sure. That's something I'd always look for. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I also think with knowledge transfer, it's not my instinct to close everything out neatly. I think you and I are a little bit different in this way. I love to just start things and dig in and go quickly and try to get things out the door. I really have to measure myself and get things organized. And I've been doing that a lot more as my career has gone on, really just get my mind around exactly what you're saying, how to hand this off the next day and feel like, oh, they'll know exactly what to do. There's a README with developer setup instructions. There's architectural decisions from the first things I looked at and why I would go in that direction. That's really powerful. And honestly, it helps us just as much as it helps the customer, because if you have to step away and you're context switching and you come back 2 days later, it's great to have that, like, let me catch up to where I just was. And then it makes you want to keep that up to date so that the next person who comes in, maybe they only have to make a little bit of a tweak. And then the person after them, same story. So it just really ends up that everyone's excited about keeping things up to speed. So
sure.
Yeah.
And it really, it ties back to what we were saying earlier. A good consultant should be thinking about outcomes and impact. And outcomes are, I'm handing this back over to customer A, and they're going to be able to maintain this going forward. So it's just something that we always like to bring up, just to make sure they're thinking with the end in mind, as they say. Yeah.
Well, and thinking about the audience too, right? Because you might have technical documentation, like I just mentioned, for your developers to get set up quickly. You might have larger architectural decisions that appeal to someone more at the senior IT level, maybe even at the CTO, CIO level. And then you might have to document something related to the vision, or how, as we've talked about many times, you connect that strategy, the vision, to the execution. If all of that's in place, now you're working with executives, not just technical teams. So that's another thing that you want to look for when you're vetting a consultant. Can you communicate with the executives just as well as with the technical teams? Can you adapt? Can you explain technical things in non-technical terms? Can you describe what success would look like? So all those things come into play.
Yeah. Interviews are tricky because you want to come across as confident. You want to make sure that you're able to share your experience when you're being interviewed. That doesn't come naturally to everyone. It's a bit braggy in cases. So as a stakeholder, somebody doing the interview, you've got to weigh and measure that. Like, is there an arrogance? Are they maybe not going to listen to your problem? Will it be that this is just the way that I'm going to deliver? It's my way or the highway.
Right.
I really like to hear a mix of humility and problem solving when it comes to a consultant's experience, right? I think with time, what we find is we realize just how much we don't know any longer, right? We're a bit naive when we start off in the industry. So best consultants, they don't pretend to know everything. They're willing to say, I'm not sure, but I've seen something similar before, and here's how I worked through it. That's an important characteristic of a consultant. If you're hearing something in an interview where it's the I'm not sure, that's okay. It's what's the follow-up comment but I've seen this before. Here's how I work through it.
That makes me think about some of the architects, enterprise architects I've come across in my career, and I'm sure you have too. They run the gamut, of course, from exactly what you're describing to very opinionated. And I've worked with CTOs who came to me when I was a consultant and said, hey, my architect is really opinionated, but he knows his stuff or she knows her stuff. And that was a bit of a red flag to me, because I think with opinionated, the default is maybe less humble, because you have to have that confidence almost to the point of arrogance to say, like, this is how architectures are done. And I've always been much more of the mind that I probably don't know the right answer, so I'm going to try a whole bunch of different things. And maybe that's a little slower, but that adaptability means I might find an angle that I hadn't considered before. And there's that other phrase, which is strong opinions weakly held, which is something else we've come across. And that one I get a little bit more. It makes a lot of sense to say, of course I'm willing to change my mind, but I know a lot and I've learned a lot along the way. That kind of rides that line of confidence to arrogance.
Yeah, I really like that. You're open to options. You're open to what is the right solution for this customer at this time, right? You meet them where they're at. Exactly. Since you brought up architects, I think it's important, like, don't skip the technical side when you're coming to the interviewing of the consultant, right? You don't have to be an engineer to interview a technical person. You just need to test their depth and their ability to explain concepts. You want to make sure that they can explain concepts that a business person can understand, usually pretty complicated things. You could, for example, ask, if we migrated to the cloud, what trade-off should we expect? You could ask, how do we decide when to build custom or to buy something off the shelf? Actually, kind of classic build versus buy.
I always love this one because it's come up so many times, and it used to be a binary decision, because custom was its own effort and you didn't have a lot of opportunities for integration. Off the shelf promised to solve so much of the problem set with configuration and customization within that off the shelf tool. I think what we've seen in the last really 20 years is it's much more of a spectrum, where there are some off-the-shelf tools that make up a small part of a really well-architected distributed system. There is some custom code you're going to need. There's integration layers. There's lots of small pieces and APIs and connectors and all that stuff. So I find that question to be much more interesting for people to ask. And if someone had an answer of, it's just, well, you buy off the shelf if you're an enterprise, and if you're a startup, you go custom. That's certainly not what you're looking for. You want to look for that nuance and understanding of where things have gone. Anyway, thanks for letting me jump in on that one. I think you had one more example you were going to throw out.
I think that's actually perfect that you mentioned that. So the question you're asking, how do you decide whether it's build custom or buy off the shelf? You're looking for a lot of questions back from that consultant. Consider all the variables in order to really not even choose between the two. As you said, like, how about rent? Like, certainly you can rent as well. Another just really lofty conversation to have, the risks you see with data, with AI or security, and how do you mitigate them? Love to get into some of the experiences the individuals had in the past. And, this is the thing that I had to do with data, and this is how I mitigated risk A. Always a wonderful conversation. You really get a chance to see how they think, how much they see around the corners, and how much experience they've had.
Yes. Speaking of seeing around the corners, I think we talked about this in a previous episode, just that idea of bringing those departments in as early as possible, because the risk horizon for data privacy or security is longer than some custom projects take to build. So you want to make sure you are watching for that as early as possible in the life cycle. Yeah, that's a great one. I also think about just what we talked about earlier a few minutes ago. Just, can you explain this to someone in non-technical terms, even if it's a highly technical concept? Can you come up with that analogy? I think you used to have an interview question in the interviews we did about soccer. Do you remember that one? I always liked that one.
I'm sorry, I do. What, the gist of the question was, take soccer analogies and explain multi-threading processes to me, right? And we got some amazing answers along the way. Maybe my favorite one was when somebody talked about the parents needing to wash the jerseys of the team and then distribute them back out to the team members later on. That was a wonderful answer. And I may in fact have learned more about multi-threading through that question that I care to admit.
Thinking outside the pitch. Sorry, I had to. But I do remember one of the answers to that question was something like, the analogy is just, imagine you had 100 players on the field and 100 soccer balls, and that was the entirety of the answer. I was like, I don't think you get it. Yeah, but good try.
Good try. What do you think about this question? I'm always a bit on the fence with it. Just asking the candidate, how do you stay current with emerging technologies? I feel like if all they can talk about is hype, but not what's practical today, that's a problem. What do you think?
I agree. And I felt that way about 5 years ago when a lot of people were talking about AI. What do you think the next big thing is, and how do you stay current? It's like, I think AI is the next big thing. And obviously it turned out to be, but back then I just felt like, that feels like such a pat answer. Just that's the word everyone uses. So so I actually perceived it negatively, and I had to go back and correct myself, check myself, and say, it is relevant. So you have to be open to a lot of different ways people do this. You want people who are staying connected, whether it's just connected professionally, something as simple as, are they active on LinkedIn? Do you see them posting or reading or replying? Can they talk about specific podcasts or blogs they follow? Maybe blogs are less of a thing now. Lots of YouTube videos that I follow, and you get these snippets of how people are building their tech stack for really high scale applications, and what are those trade-offs. And if you're doing something for a startup founder who is expecting to have 100 users, you don't need to do a lot of that stuff. So being aware of those trade-offs and learning how people navigate the different ways you can consume info. I think it's relevant. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I think one of the questions, and a bit of a closer on the interviews, we'd ask, what's the next big thing? Right? Just curious. And that made for a really interesting conversation, just to see what people are digging into on their own, if they're really keeping up, even independently of where they gain their source of information. Yeah, that was really great. How about when we'd sometimes throw curveball questions at a candidate, like just in how do they react to the question themselves? I'm not able to think of one that we may have asked. I definitely asked. You have, okay?
Yeah, there was one that I liked to ask, and now I know it's a little bit of a gotcha question, but where it was coming from was a good place, which is how would you design an elevator in a high-rise building?
Yeah.
And I really love that question, because so many people would just jump to the solution like we talked about earlier. And if I saw someone doing that, I would be a little bit cruel and say, well, I said it was a high-rise building, but it's an abandoned building, and come up with something that's just, well, you didn't ask, so how can you come in and say, well, I'd have 6 elevators, and the first 3 elevators go only to the first 15 floors, and the others start at 15 and go to 30. And then I would say, how did you know there were 30 floors? I just said it was high rise. So right. What you're looking for is asking those clarifying questions, slowing down, thinking it through. And then you just have an interesting conversation about design concepts, and they're not stuck in technology. You're just learning how they use their brain to work through what might be a really complicated problem to solve. And it actually is when you look at it. So yeah, I like those.
So I love that question. And it was one of the questions that you and our colleague Ray asked me when I was onboarding onto one of the companies we work together in. And I love the question so much because when you asked it, my stomach sank. Oh. And I was like, oh, I should know how to design an elevator. And then I quickly realized, like, wait, there's a lot of questions I need to ask. And I think we talk through at least for 30 minutes, just everything from, well, what's the weather that day, to how many people are going to lunch and, various things within the workday that would influence how the elevators worked. I think we ended up just deciding everybody should take the stairs.
Yeah, much safer. And in a fire, that's what you want to do anyway. So yeah, makes sense. You made me realize when you mentioned Ray that one of the things that that the 3 of us really honed over hundreds of interviews was this idea of digging to the level of someone's knowledge, where we didn't have just a question, we had a series of questions that were one level deeper, so that we could give them a bit of a softball right up front, give them a little comfort, confidence. We go one level deeper, and they're getting into it. They're they've got some thought around it, and then we just keep going. And Ray was really a master at this, where he could just say, well, what about, and it could get pretty technical, right? It's like, well, if you look at the underlying implementation of a hash set in Java, then you realize that, and then he would kind of have that, you'd have those people who knew more than Ray. There were maybe only 2 of them ever in hundreds of interviews, but they really knew the guts of the system. And that it's a different kind of value than just being able to adapt and respond to that question. But really, really fascinating to learn how to interview more effectively by finding where that cutoff point was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that someone who's more aligned with the business can do. It doesn't have to be a technical dig deeper. It could be scenario based on, the consultant working with multiple stakeholders or business groups and trying to hash out something to find, common ground between the two. And you've got to go to this stakeholder who's amazingly busy right now. How do you get answers from them when you need the answers a day from now? So all of those are, real life problems. And based on that answer, you can provide more questions and go deeper and deeper. It makes the interview a bit more conversational as well, which I feel just takes the load off of the person being interviewed, the consultant in that case. It's like, we're just talking. You're not peppering me with difficult questions.
But you're making me realize something interesting that I hadn't thought of before, which is, I think consultants tend not to get interviewed nearly as deeply as someone that an organization is hiring for full-time employment. It makes sense, but if you're bringing in a consultant to fix or run a major initiative for your organization, you probably should know as much about them if you're giving them access to lead a lot of your people as you do the people that you're employing and paying salary to. Sure. It's worth going to that level of depth depending on the complexity and importance of that role. So yeah, kind of fascinating.
So Noah, as the stakeholder, as the individual is interviewing a consultant, what is it to you that would make them really stand out? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I always say this. Active listening is my number one thing, and it's really, it's obvious when someone is not absorbing everything that you're saying.
Sure.
Because they have an answer ready to go and they just want to get it out there. Some people are a little better at hiding it than others, but then there are certain people you talk to and you just know that they are deeply engaged and that you have time to get whatever you need to say out, and that they'll process it and come up with an appropriate response. That active listening, I actually think, is quite a rare skill in the world in general, and really, really critical for a highly successful consultant.
Yeah, I think what's married right to that is attention to detail and preparedness, right? I want to make sure that I'm seeing that the consultant has done their homework. They understand the role that they would play. They would understand the business to a reasonable extent so that they can ask the right questions, right? It's absolutely the stakeholder. They're interviewing the candidate, the consultant, but consultants, tip for you, you're interviewing them as well. And so bring those sharp questions, really pay attention in the interview, be on time, look sharp, make sure that you're fully engaged, and you're both, the person interviewing and yourself will actually learn quite a bit throughout this process.
Yeah, right on the heels of that is another big one for me, which is responsiveness. So if you were prepared, then and you were paying attention to detail, then you should and could deliver value quickly. You can provide something of value during that initial meeting and immediately after. Just being responsive and adapting to the information that you hear is so valuable. And I say this all the time, but there's a lot of times when you get a request, email, call, whatever, and you just can't invest the time to provide a professional, detailed response. But you absolutely have the time to send an email back that takes you 10 seconds to say, hey, got your email, really want to dig into this and give you a proper response. I'll get back to you in 2 days. It's amazing how many people don't do that. And it goes such a long way. Just be responsive. It's great on the consultant side, and it really shows the person who might bring you in how much you care. Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah. It's also powerful when the consultant is willing to ask the questions so that they can really understand the problem before they do the solutioning.
Yes.
This is just tried and true. This is what consultants do. They're always thinking solution. They're thinking solution in the interview. They're thinking solution when it comes to their kickoff meetings. They're thinking about solutions as they're transitioning to the company that they've been working for. It's just old habit. But the experienced folks, they know, step back, ask the right questions, understand the problem first before you jump into the tools and offer up answers too quickly, without the context, because that's just very risky. So look out for that.
Yep, 100%. And of course, communication. Got to be clear, verbal, written communication, being able to explain technology in simple terms, really, really powerful. We talked about that earlier. That communication it can be so obvious and so simple, so quickly and early in a project. If you see any red flags with how something is communicated, it's not professional, it's short, even something as basic as the grammar doesn't make sense, then you're looking back at the attention to detail and something is missing there. So yeah, communication, huge.
I so appreciate that you're calling out written correspondence, spelling errors, grammar. Boy, I know they jump off the page for a lot of people. And I totally agree. I know that people are short on time these days. Like there's a lot of urgency. I think that there's some communication. It makes sense that you cut some corners. But overall, I'd say that there's a lot of tools baked into your email client that will support you in making sure things are cleaned up pretty well. So yes, take that time. A little polish goes a long way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and on the adaptability, to refer back to a previous one we mentioned, the clear communication can be audience specific. We both know people who tend to write 5-word responses in email as if it's just an emergency chat or a text. And that's how they communicate. So it's okay to communicate that way back to them, depending on your relationship. Have you built up some trust there? Because you know that's how their brain works, how they think, and how they might process information. If someone sends you a really detailed email with 7 bullets, you know they're the kind of person who puts care and time into their email, and they're willing to read similar levels of detail coming back from the consultant. So sometimes it's good to match and adapt to how they like to communicate, just to build that trust.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for those busy stakeholders out there, leaders that are vetting consultants, if that consultant sends you a thank you note and it's 3-page document, they probably don't understand how well to communicate with you. Right? When you're communicating with leadership, short, sweet, concise, get your point across, because busy, busy, busy. So yes, know your audience, as you just mentioned, Noah. Yeah.
I realize we're kind of rolling along here. We've got we've been on a long time. We got excited about this topic. Do we want to do just like some quick hits on some remaining ideas, and then maybe some quick red flags so we can get people on their way?
Yes, let's do it. Let's get people on their way, including me.
Yeah.
Yes. How about I do want to make sure that we talk about some of those red flags, right? Like this goes whether or not you're interviewing a client or you are having them working with you actively. It's overpromising. I think that one is, just a super red flag. Unrealistic timelines or guarantees. That is just, without really justification, knowing all the right information. That one sounds the alarms for me.
Yep. That makes me think of the one size fits all type solutions, right? The hammer where everything is a nail. The standard framework where the consulting company builds their standard framework, and it is super flexible and adaptable, but it's the thing that's going to solve every problem. We're seeing that a lot now with AI, and whether it's a model or a tool or a complete platform that's supposed to solve all those problems. That's always something to watch out for, because you bring in a consultant, you vet a consultant to really understand the details of your problem and come up with a solution that addresses that, not just puts their framework in place.
Yeah. And maybe just to close, Noah, we can talk some practical advice for leaders. What would be maybe your number one? And I know what your number one is because we just had this come up in a conversation with a potential customer yesterday.
Yeah. If you can get real world experience and provide value by doing something small that is absolutely related to a problem they're trying to address. You've got a pilot, you've got a prototype or a proof of concept. It gives them something to test your value quickly. You're providing that right out of the gate, and it gives us as consultants an ability to wrap our minds around the potential complexity, because we've estimated hundreds of projects, and we've probably gotten most of them wrong in some way. It's really, really hard to estimate perfectly. We've had some great ones too, but when you do that, when you go through the exercise of a pilot and you're thinking in terms of their pain points, they can't get to their information quickly enough, and we want to move data to something where we can pull it back quickly and it's going to be accurate. let's test that out. Let's pick one of those data sources and try to write something against it and prove to the client that we know what we're doing, or that it's a much bigger and more complex problem than we ever thought it was. Mm-hmm. And that's going to help dictate how the conversations go from there and what our first estimates look like. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you have? I know you've got.
Yeah, I've got quite a number, but maybe my advice is to bring in all of the right business leaders, bring in IT leadership, bring in business leadership, make sure that the vetting doesn't fall onto just a single individual within the company, right? You've got to make sure that this consultant's going to be working with the various teams anyhow. They might be able to spot issues that you, as the core stakeholder, the leader, might just miss. So involve everybody early. That's not only going to make sure that you're vetting that consultant very intentionally, but you're also going to help them kind of bring up those early relationships with the people that they'll need to work with later on. They won't just be like knocking on the door and saying, hey, here's day one. I'm Ben, and this is what I'm going to do for you. Bring everybody along, and also they'll help you recognize any potential issues or anything that they really get excited about with that consultant. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said bring everybody along, because it's not just bring them in at the beginning and set the stage for the project, which is usually what happens. It's like, oh yeah, we told everybody about it. We involved everybody, but then they went off and did their own thing, and there wasn't a connection between the strategy of the company, the execution at the ground level, and then all of the different people who were impacted by it, all those stakeholders. And it's challenging to bring them along, to have them in each meeting. And a lot of times they won't come to those meetings if you set them up as just, we're doing our weekly check-in, optional for you stakeholders. If you have anything you want to contribute, come on in and share. People are busy. They often don't show up to those meetings, and then they still feel like they have a right to complain down the road. So you want someone as a technology consultant who's going to bring those people along, go and proactively reach out and say, hey, this big decision was made. It's going to impact you. Give me your feedback now, and let's figure out how we want to move forward. So really, really great example.
Yeah. So thanks for keeping eyeballs on the clock, Noah.
Yeah.
I think you actually landed in a great spot with your last comment. Just onboarding. What do you do the first few days, first few weeks when you are a consultant and you're onboarded into a new customer? Why don't we talk about that next time?
Oh yeah, that's a great point. And I just got really excited and a little bit scared, because I was like, oh, there's so many thoughts I have and we have no time. So I see what you did. Yes. Yeah, that sounds great. So this was a longer conversation, but really, really cool. So thank you for that. And yeah, if you have had a great experience with consultants or a not so great experience, let us know. And maybe we'll have you on the show to share it with everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Noah.
Thanks. See you in the next one.
Bye.